Lexington, in the suburbs of Boston, was experiencing a change of seasons. As the old maple trees along Main Street began turning red and the morning air grew crisp, Evelyn Wilson was busy preparing to open her pharmacy. She had followed in her father's footsteps, working as a pharmacist at Wilson Pharmacy, a well-established business that had been in the city for over 20 years. "Mom, I brought this for you," came a small voice. Turning around, she saw Aidan holding out the lunch box she had forgotten. Evelyn felt her heart warm at the sight of her son, who was so thoughtful despite being only 5 years old. "Thank you, Aidan. You're really so dependable." Evelyn knelt down and kissed her son's forehead. Aidan had blue eyes just like his mother and black hair from his father. His kindergarten teacher had described him as a child with remarkably good language comprehension. "Grandma will be here soon," Aidan said. True to his words, Doris appeared at the back door of the pharmacy. It had been 2 years since she lost her husband Robert, and she still hadn't fully recovered from her grief. Nevertheless, she made it a routine to look after her grandson 3 days a week. "Good morning, Evelyn. I'll take Aidan to kindergarten today and then take him shopping." "Thanks, Mom. You're such a big help," Evelyn expressed her gratitude while busy with her morning preparations. As a single mother raising her son, her mother's presence was a significant support. She had divorced her husband Mark 3 years ago. Mark had moved to the West Coast, and though he called occasionally, he rarely met with Aidan. "Doris, Evelyn, and cute little Aidan. How is everyone?" A cheerful voice echoed through the pharmacy. Carol entered wearing a designer brand coat. Carol was the daughter of Robert's first wife. Though she was much older than Evelyn, who was born from his second marriage, their father had always tried to treat them equally. "Good morning, Carol. It's unusual to see you this early," Evelyn said gently. "I have a meeting in Boston. I stopped by before heading there," Carol said, reaching out to Aidan. "Here, Aidan. A present from your aunt." Aidan hesitated slightly but accepted the small box Carol offered. Inside was an intricately made model airplane. "Thank you, Aunt Carol," Aidan said politely. Carol smiled as she stroked Aidan's head, but Evelyn noticed the smile didn't reach her eyes. Carol always adorned herself with flashy clothes and expensive accessories, but Evelyn worried that it might be becoming difficult for her to maintain that lifestyle after their father's death. "Have you heard from the lawyer about settling Dad's estate?" Carol asked casually. "I signed the papers last week. Haven't you been contacted?" "No, nothing yet." Carol's expression showed slight dissatisfaction. "I'm also concerned about Aidan's trust fund. Robert had worked as a researcher at a pharmaceutical company for many years and held several patents. After his death, a considerable estate was left behind, part of which was set up as a trust fund for Aidan. Evelyn and Carol were to divide the rest, but Carol also served as the administrator of Aidan's trust fund. "Dad was thinking about Aidan's future too," Doris said quietly. "Robert always put family first." Carol's expression clouded for a moment before quickly returning to a smile. "Yes, Dad was a wonderful person," she said hurriedly, looking at her watch. "Oh, I must go now. I'll be late for my meeting." After Carol left, Evelyn watched her from the pharmacy window. Her relationship with her sister was complicated. Carol was kind on the surface, but Evelyn was concerned about her occasional cold expressions and her attachment to the inheritance. "Aunt Carol is scary," Aidan suddenly said. Evelyn looked at her son in surprise. "Why? Doesn't Aunt Carol always bring you presents?" Aidan firmly gripped his mother's hand and said with serious blue eyes wide open, "Because her smile isn't real." Doris and Evelyn exchanged glances. Evelyn thought that sometimes a child's intuition is sharper than an adult's. On a pleasant May morning, the senior kindergarten class at Bayview Kindergarten was on a spring field trip to the nearby Hammond Nature Reserve. Evelyn had left the pharmacy in the care of a colleague to participate as a parent volunteer.
Do you know some people earn over $10,000 a month just by posting Reddit stories on YouTube? No face, no voice, just a laptop. I do it too, link below if you're curious.
Among the soft sunlight filtering through the trees, Aiden was observing colorful wildflowers with his friends. "This trail has a really lovely view," said Mrs. Johnson, the teacher, as she led the children. Evelyn was helping prepare lunch a short distance away. As she arranged the lunch boxes, an unexpected visitor appeared. "Surprise!" Carol waved, appearing in her glamorous attire. "I stopped by on my way to work. I wanted to see Aiden." "Carol! Why are you here?" Evelyn was surprised. It was the first time Carol had participated in any of Aiden's school events. "I saw the field trip notice and thought it was good timing," Carol shrugged. "Plus, I wanted to show Aiden something nice." Aiden came to his mother's side and looked up at Carol. His expression showed wariness. "Aiden, won't you come with me? There's a place a little ahead with an amazing view." Carol extended her hand. "But I need to stay with my class," Aiden clung to his mother. "It's okay, we'll be right back. I've already spoken with Mrs. Johnson," Carol smiled. Evelyn felt uncomfortable with Carol's sudden proposal. "I'll come too," she said. "Oh, that would ruin the surprise," Carol said, seeming a bit irritated. "Look, Grandma's here too." Looking back, they could see Doris walking from the parking lot. "Mom? You're here too?" "Yes, Carol called me yesterday," Doris answered, appearing somewhat uneasy. "I wanted to see Aiden." "Mom, Aunt Carol says she wants to show me something," Aiden told his grandmother. "Yes, that's right. Off you go," Doris smiled, but her eyes looked anxious. "I'll take Aiden." "Evelyn, you continue with the lunch preparations," Carol forcefully took Aiden's hand. "Doris, are you coming too?" Doris hesitated momentarily but nodded. "Yes, I'll come." Evelyn had a strange feeling but trusted her mother and Carol, so she decided to continue with her preparations. "Be careful, Aiden. Mommy will be waiting right here." What happened next would change Evelyn's life forever. As she was wrapping the last sandwich, she heard a scream. It was her mother's voice. Then, the children's teacher came running over. "Evelyn! Hurry! By the cliff! Aiden!" Her world stopped in that moment. At the lookout point along the trail, Aiden had fallen from the cliff. When Evelyn arrived, the emergency team was already there. Aiden was motionless, being placed on a stretcher. Blood flowed from his head, and his face was pale. "Aiden!" Evelyn cried out, rushing to her child. Doris sat on a stone bench, trembling. "He suddenly ran. I couldn't stop him," she repeated through tears. Carol stood a short distance away, deathly pale. "It's not my fault. I didn't." The ambulance sped to Massachusetts General Hospital. The following hours were a nightmare for Evelyn. The doctors diagnosed a severe head injury and performed emergency surgery. The surgery was successful, Dr. Morris, the neurosurgeon, explained with a tired expression. "But there's severe brain swelling, and he's in a coma. The next 48 hours will be critical." Evelyn held her son's small hand and spent the night at his ICU bedside. Aiden was connected to various medical devices, lying quietly in a state unimaginable from his once lively self. "Please come back," she whispered in her son's ear. "Mommy's waiting." In the hospital hallway, Doris sobbed uncontrollably. "My grandson, what have I?" Carol came to the hospital repeatedly, persistently questioning the nurses. Did he say anything? Does he remember anything? Her inquiries were unnaturally persistent. The police began investigating the incident as an accident, but with no witnesses, details remained unclear. According to Carol and Doris, the three of them were admiring the view when Aiden suddenly ran off and slipped. He's always been such a careful child, Evelyn explained to the detective with tired eyes. He wouldn't do anything so dangerous. By morning, Aiden's condition remained unchanged. The doctors explained, he's breathing on his own, but regaining consciousness may take time. In the worst case, they suggested the possibility of permanent brain damage. A week passed, and Evelyn had adapted to life at the hospital. She temporarily closed the pharmacy, spending days by her son's side and taking brief naps in the family lounge at night. Evelyn eventually began to notice something strange about her mother. Doris seemed tormented by guilt whenever she visited Aiden's room. And Evelyn felt uneasy about Carol's frequent visits and suspicious questions. Aiden really hasn't said anything? Carol asked repeatedly. I've heard sometimes people in a coma say things. He hasn't said anything, Evelyn answered with a tired expression. Why are you so concerned about that? Just worried, Carol quickly excused herself. Because I love him. By the third week, the doctors began to show slightly more hopeful views. We're seeing some improvement in brain activity, Dr. Morris explained. He's still in a coma, but there's a possibility he might regain consciousness. That morning, Evelyn was in the hospital room with Doris and Carol. Carol was on the phone by the window, and Doris sat on the opposite side of Aiden's bed. That's when the miracle happened. Aiden's fingers moved slightly. Then, slowly, his eyelids opened. Aiden's blue eyes regained their light for the first time in 3 weeks. Aiden! Evelyn cried out her son's name and rushed to the bed. Oh God! Aiden! She touched her son's cheek with trembling hands. Aiden slowly blinked, trying to focus. Carol hung up the phone and approached with a surprised expression. Doris remained frozen in her chair. Mommy! Aiden's voice was faint but definitely audible. Evelyn gently embraced her son, tears of joy streaming down her face. I'm here, Aiden. Mommy has been here all along. Dr. Morris and the nurses rushed into the room. Wonderful, the doctor said excitedly. This is a recovery faster than we expected. While the doctor checked Aiden's pupil response and basic neurological reactions, Evelyn held her son's hand tightly. Carol stood by the window, appearing strangely restless. Let me run some tests, Dr. Morris told Evelyn. I'll check his basic neurological functions. Aiden responded to the doctor's questions with slight nods or by moving his fingers. His cognitive functions seemed miraculously preserved. Aiden, does anything hurt? The doctor asked. My head feels heavy, Aiden answered weakly. That's natural, the doctor explained gently. But you're a very brave boy. After the examination, Dr. Morris turned to Evelyn. He's doing better than expected. Of course, it will take time for a full recovery, but the brain damage doesn't seem as severe as we feared. Evelyn breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, doctor. After the doctor and nurses left, silence returned to the room. Aiden slowly moved his gaze, looking around at the people in the room. He smiled at his mother, then looked at Carol. A slight tension crossed his expression. Finally, he turned his gaze to Doris. Aiden slowly raised his right hand and extended it toward Doris. Grandma. Doris hesitantly placed her hand over her grandson's. Aiden. Grandma's here, her voice trembled. Then, something unexpected happened. Aiden gripped Doris's hand firmly and looked straight into her eyes. Grandma. I know everything. Though his voice was weak, it reached everyone in the room clearly. The color drained from Doris's face, and she sank deep into her chair. "What?" Doris whispered faintly. Doris tried to pull her hand away, but Aidan held it with surprising strength. Evelyn looked back and forth between her son and mother in confusion. "Aidan, what do you know?" Evelyn asked quietly. Aidan began to speak slowly but with determination. "That day, when Aunt Carol took me to the cliff, Grandma was there too, right?" The air in the room froze. Carol leaned against the wall, her complexion suddenly deteriorating. "Aidan, you're confused," Carol said hastily. "The accident memory." Aidan shook his head and looked at his mother. "Mom, Aunt Carol took me near the cliff." He caught his breath before continuing. "With Grandma." Evelyn stood up in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Mom, Carol, what is this about?" "Aidan is confused," Carol said frantically. "His head injury has affected his memory." "No," Aidan's voice was weak but full of conviction. "Aunt Carol was angry about money. She said if I was gone, she could get Mom's share too." Evelyn was too shocked to speak. She looked from her son to her mother, then to Carol. Carol's face had turned gray, and Doris had begun to cry. "Grandma said, you're joking, right?" At first, Aidan continued. "But Aunt Carol said, this is how we solve our problem. Then she told me the view from the edge of the cliff is so beautiful." Doris covered her face with both hands, crying as her shoulders shook. I never." Evelyn looked at her sister with an expression mixing horror and anger. "Carol, is this true?" Carol hurriedly headed for the door. "This is absurd. He's just confused. I don't need to take this insult." "But," Aidan continued in a faint voice, "I remember everything. Aunt Carol grabbed my arm and took me to the edge of the cliff. And then, she pushed my back." The room fell silent. Evelyn pressed the emergency button with trembling hands. "I did no such thing," Carol shouted. "He's lying. I saw it." Doris finally squeezed out the words. "Carol, pushing. Aidan." Evelyn's world collapsed. Her mother and sister had tried to kill her son. Why? For the inheritance. In a daze, she firmly grabbed Carol's arm as she headed for the door. "You're not going anywhere," Evelyn's voice was cold and resolute. A nurse rushed into the room. "What's wrong?" "Call the police," Evelyn said quietly but firmly. "And security too." "Evelyn, calm down," Carol said desperately. "This is all a misunderstanding. Aidan is just confused." Aidan tried to sit up in bed. "I'm not lying," his blue eyes glistened with tears. "When I was about to die, I saw everything. I was watching from above. I saw myself falling." Evelyn returned to her son's side and gently embraced him. "I believe you, Aidan," she said, burying her face in her son's hair. "Mommy believes you." As security guards restrained Carol, Doris began her confession in a trembling voice. "I didn't fully understand what Carol was planning. She said she was just going to scare Aidan. But on the cliff, the look in her eyes changed." As the atmosphere in the room grew heavy, Aidan whispered in his mother's ear. "Grandpa told me." Massachusetts State Police Detective Jennifer Riley sat across from Evelyn in the hospital conference room. Her experienced eyes held a mixture of sympathy and professional composure. "Ms. Wilson, these are very serious allegations," Detective Riley said quietly. "Your child's testimony alone might not be sufficient to press charges." Evelyn gripped her coffee cup with trembling hands. A day had passed since Aidan's confession. Carol had voluntarily accompanied the police and strongly denied the accusations. Doris had been hospitalized in another facility due to mental shock. But my mother has admitted it, Evelyn said in a tired voice. And Aiden has no reason to lie. Your mother's testimony is vague and doesn't directly support attempted murder, Detective Riley explained apologetically. Harrison's lawyer is arguing that Aiden's memory is confused due to the coma. So there's nothing you can do. Evelyn's voice contained anger. No, Detective Riley leaned forward with a serious expression. We will investigate thoroughly. First, we'll look into Harrison's motive. We need information about her financial situation, insurance, and inheritance matters. Evelyn sighed heavily. It's my father's estate. Carol was supposed to share it with me. And Aiden has a special trust fund. Who is the administrator of the trust fund? Carol, Evelyn said with a bitter expression. My father trusted her very much. Detective Riley narrowed her eyes sharply. And access rights to that fund? If Carol became Aiden's guardian. Evelyn choked on her words. A terrible truth hit her. If I were gone. Ms. Wilson, Detective Riley said gently but firmly, let us investigate everything. The next day, as Evelyn watched over Aiden's recovery, she heard her cell phone ring. It was Jonathan Green, her lawyer. Evelyn, the results of Carol's financial investigation are in, his voice was serious. She's accumulated substantial debt over the past 2 years. It seems she has a gambling addiction. Evelyn caught her breath. How much? At least $700,000, Green answered. And? He hesitated for a moment. About $150,000 were withdrawn from Aiden's trust fund as an emergency investment. Evelyn trembled with anger. She stole it. Technically, she has administrative rights, Green explained. But it's clearly a breach of trust. And one more thing. What? Carol had made herself the beneficiary of your life insurance policy. Without your knowledge. Evelyn was speechless. All the pieces started to connect. She looked at Aiden. Her son was sleeping, but his expression was peaceful. Thank you, Jonathan. Please pass this information to the police. 4 days later, Evelyn sat in her mother's hospital room. Doris had aged considerably and had no life in her eyes. Can we talk? Evelyn asked gently. Doris slowly nodded. I cannot be forgiven, she said tearfully. Why, Mom? Evelyn's voice was a mixture of sadness and anger. Why would you do this to Aiden? I never intended to hurt him, Doris clutched a handkerchief with trembling hands. Carol said she wanted to scare Aiden so you would give him up. If you moved out of state, Carol could become Aiden's guardian and have more involvement in managing the estate. And you believed that? Carol was always persuasive, tears flowed from Doris's eyes. She promised that Aiden would be far enough from the cliff. Just to scare him. But that's not what happened. Doris cried, her shoulders shaking. Carol suddenly changed. Her eyes were different. She took Aiden to the edge of the cliff, and before I could stop her. She choked on her words. I screamed. But it was too late. Understanding her mother's guilt, Evelyn still felt anger and grief tearing at her heart. Why didn't you tell the police? Fear, Doris said in a small voice. And shame. I was manipulated by Carol. She always whispered, you only have one real daughter. Evelyn took her mother's hand. Mom. I love you, Evelyn, Doris said through tears. But I was weak. Carol kept saying that your father loved her mother more than me. That I was second best. And that you were. second best too. Evelyn asked quietly. Robert loved you, Doris said firmly. But I believed Carol's words. She took advantage of my weak heart. Torn between justice and love for her family, Evelyn said after a long silence, "Tell the police everything." Detective Riley faced Carol in the police station interrogation room. A thick folder of documents lay before her. "Ms. Harrison, we have your financial records, evidence of fraudulent withdrawals from Aiden Wilson's trust fund, and Doris Wilson's testimony," Detective Riley said calmly. "There's no escape." Carol folded her arms, maintaining a defiant attitude. "All speculation. The confused testimony of a 5-year-old and the delusions of an old woman. And this?" Detective Riley pushed forward a piece of paper. "A life insurance application you took out 2 days before the accident. Beneficiary, you. Insured, Evelyn Wilson." The color drained from Carol's face. "Furthermore, you withdrew $150,000 from Aiden's fund and spent it at casinos in Las Vegas and Atlantic City," Detective Riley continued. "You were on the verge of bankruptcy. And if Aiden and Evelyn were gone, you would have gotten the entire inheritance." After a long silence, Carol finally broke down. "That child was in the way," she suddenly raged. "Robert always said, Aiden is the future of the Wilson family. My mother loved Robert for years and sacrificed everything for him. Yet, in the end, she was abandoned." She continued, trembling with anger, "The inheritance shouldn't go to Doris and that child. I was the real daughter. The first wife's daughter. And yet." "So you did try to kill Aiden Wilson," Detective Riley said quietly. "If he was gone, Evelyn would have been so distraught she would have moved away." "Then I could have managed everything," Carol said coldly. "The plan was perfect. That old woman was at my beck and call. But when that child woke up from the coma..." "Carol Harrison," Detective Riley stood up and officially announced, "You are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder, child abuse, embezzlement, and fraud." Evelyn sat at Aiden's bedside, watching over her son's recovery. According to Dr. Morris, his recovery could be called a medical miracle. "Mom," Aiden said quietly. "Grandpa said I had to come back." Evelyn listened to her son's words. "You met Grandpa?" Aiden nodded slightly. "Up there. When I was in the sky. Grandpa said, it's not time yet. And he showed me what Aunt Carol and Grandma did." Evelyn gently stroked her son's hair. Though it might not be scientifically explainable, she believed her son. "What happens now?" Aiden asked anxiously. "Everything will be all right," Evelyn embraced her son. "The police have taken Aunt Carol away. Grandma is a little unwell, but she'll get better. Grandpa said forgiving is important." Aiden looked straight into his mother's eyes. "But not forgetting." Evelyn nodded, surprised by her son's profound words. It would be a long journey, but they had to move forward one step at a time. Now that the truth had been revealed, the healing process was about to begin. A year later in autumn, golden trees swayed in the wind in a park in the Boston suburbs. Aiden ran around energetically, kicking up fallen leaves. Now 6 years old, he showed almost no traces of the accident. Although he occasionally experienced confusion in his memories and mild headaches, he had recovered far better than the doctors had predicted. Evelyn sat on a bench, watching her son. Beside her, Doris sat quietly. The relationship between mother and daughter wasn't completely back to normal, but it was healing bit by bit. "He's really a strong child," Doris said, gazing at Aiden. Evelyn smiled. "Yes. Sometimes I'm amazed by his strength." Doris took an envelope from her bag with aged hands. "I wanted to give this to you. Evelyn opened the envelope and looked at the documents inside. They were certificates of volunteer work and records of donations to a children's protection facility. "This is about all I can do," Doris said in a small voice. "But I live every day to make amends." Carol was serving a 10-year sentence in the state prison. She never uttered a word of remorse, but that was no longer important to Evelyn. She had chosen to move forward with her and her son's lives. "Aiden, it's time to go," Evelyn called to her son. Aiden came running but stopped midway and stood in front of a tree. He looked up at the sky as if seeing something. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. "Grandpa is here again," Aiden said with a smile. "He's waving at me." Doris and Evelyn exchanged glances. Since his coma experience, Aiden had occasionally said he felt his grandfather's presence. The doctors explained it as hallucinations due to his brain condition, but Evelyn felt it was something more. "What is Grandpa saying?" Doris asked in a trembling voice. "He's happy that everyone is doing well," Aiden answered. "And?" He tilted his head as if thinking. "He says real family stays together, no matter what." Evelyn took Doris's hand. Her mother's hand was cold and wrinkled, but she felt warmth in it. She might not have fully forgiven her mother yet, but they had begun walking together. "Let's go," Evelyn said quietly. "It's family time." The three of them began walking down the path where fallen leaves danced. Aiden walked between them, holding each of their hands. As the sun began to set in the western sky, their long shadows stretched across the ground. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. But the power of truth and forgiveness can create light from the darkest moments. Evelyn understood this from the bottom of her heart. Since that day when her son woke up and told the shocking truth, their lives had changed forever. But now, they were walking a new path, together.